Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the Big Ten Show. I'm your host, Adam Carriker. I've got a special guest with me, but before I bring my new friend on, I want to give a shout out to our sponsor, the Jacobson Seed Company. They're your healthy hybrid advantage farmers. Hopefully, you not only enjoy our Big Ten content here on the Big Ten Show, but they will take care of all your seed needs. The Jacobson Seed Company, your healthy hybrid advantage. Check them out at jacobsonseed.com. All right, today I am joined by the managing editor of USA Today's Ducks Wire and the host of the Sco-ing Long podcast, Mr. Zach Neel. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great, man. Thanks for having me on. I'm really happy to be here.
I appreciate you joining me. And dude, you are an expert in all things Ducks football. Okay. And I got to ask you right off the top. Okay. So I actually grew up in the Northwest. I went to Oregon
Oh,
State's football camp every year, 4 years of high school. Okay, but I've been to Oregon a million times. I used to go four-wheeling with my dad on the Oregon coast.
mm.
Florence, Coos Bay, Winchester Bay. I don't know if you ever heard of those,
Oh
but we
yeah.
used to go. Yeah, we'd go for a week long. Basically, never cover the same ground twice. We'd get up at 7, eat breakfast, then we'd four-wheel till lunch, eat a quick lunch, and then we'd four-wheel till like 7, 8 p.m. And it was for 7 straight days, never covered the same ground twice. Have you gone four-wheeling on the phenomenal dunes of the Oregon coast? And if you have, man, tell the fine folks about it. I feel like it's a hidden gem people don't know enough about.
Absolutely, man. I mean, that's what's one of the great things about Oregon is you have so many different kind of scenic areas. I mean, you get whatever you want to see. You get the dunes, you can go, skiing, snowboarding, you can go to the coast, you can go into the deep woods. But yeah, four-wheeling on the sand dunes, that's a lot of fun. Just go over, spend a weekend on the coast. It's only like a hour drive from where I am right now. That's kind of the nice thing about Eugene. You're about an hour away from anything that you want.
So where I grew up in the state of Washington, it was about an 8-hour drive. So we take a day to get there, and then we take a day to get back, so to speak. My parents still go there. They got a side by side. They're a little older now. Okay, so my mom doesn't want to drive the four wheeler. Plus, she's had a couple of close calls. I about killed myself twice. Uh, I was learning how to drive, and my dad had literally just said, "You're dangerous." I go, "What's that?" He goes, "You don't know anything, but you know enough to think you know everything, which means you're going to get in trouble." Literally within 30 minutes, I found the highest dune I could find, almost got to the top, and instead of turning around or doing the appropriate protocol to get around, change my course safely, I just bailed off the four wheeler. And I'm rolling down this big dune, and my dad's watching as the thing goes end over end, chasing after me. That's just one of them. Anyways, I digress, man. Let's talk a little bit of Ducks football. Well, let's talk Bo Nix. We got the NFL draft coming up. What do you see as far as his NFL potential and his projections of where he might be drafted?
I mean, we've seen him be highly successful at the college level, obviously. I mean, he is one of the most experienced quarterbacks in this draft class. I mean, that's not really a controversial opinion. He's got more
Mhm.
starts than anyone in the history of college football as far as starting quarterbacks. So he has a really high floor, I believe. I don't know that his ceiling is as high as people like
Mhm.
Drake May or Caleb Williams. Obviously, you kind of know what you're going to get from him. You're going to get an efficient passer. He's going to make the right reads. He may not have the flash plays like some of the top quarterbacks, but I like to see him go somewhere where he has, obviously everyone wants to see their quarterback go somewhere where they have a chance to succeed, but I don't want to see him go somewhere where he's asked to be the guy day one. I would love to see, I talked to my co-host Jonathan Stewart about this yesterday on our podcast. I'd love to see him go to someone like the Los Angeles Rams, where he could
Mhm.
sit behind Matthew Stafford for a couple of years, learn the system, and then be with Sean McVay for, the next 10 years of his career and just be part of a dynamic offense. We saw what that dynamic offensive play calling looks like for him at Oregon with Will Stein and what they drew up for him. They really put him in a good position to succeed. I see him as someone that can have a really long career in the NFL if he gets put in the right situation and if he's not asked to do too much early on. I think that you know, someone like Caleb Williams, someone like Jaden Daniels, Drake May, they might have the over the top skill talent to be able to flash day one and be able to go and step in as a starter. I don't know that Bo Nix has those same intangibles. That's not to say he's a bad quarterback at all. I just think that he might need a little bit more development at the next level, and just not asked to do everything all at once.
So it's interesting because the Rams stuck out to me as a team that could be a good fit for him. What about a team like the 49ers, who and Brock Purdy played well in the Super Bowl? He takes lots of heat, but you could argue maybe they're a quarterback away. It depends on how you look at it. But I think what he does physically, Bo Nix, fits their offense well. Potentially him and Brock could have a quarterback battle, or like you said, he could learn for a year or two under Brock. What do you think of a place like the 49ers who pick at number 31?
I love that. That's the type of system that I'm talking about. I mean, I think that Bo Nix is pretty comparable to Brock Purdy because
Mhm,
they're very, they play within themselves. They don't
mhm.
try and do too much if they're in the right offensive scheme. We saw that with Bo Nix at Auburn. Excuse me. He tried to get out and ahead of himself too much and tried to make the home run plays all the time. Got himself in trouble a lot. When he came to Oregon, he settled down a little bit, played within the system, let the offense kind of run around him, and he just kind of he quarterbacked it obviously, and he took what was given to him. And I think working with someone like Kyle Shanahan, working with someone like Sean McVay, I think he's got a really good chance to succeed if he's in the right offense.
It's interesting. I was fortunate enough to play in DC when McVay was coaching tight ends and Shanahan was coaching the OC under his dad, and there was like 18 future head coaches. Matt LaFleur was there as well. Okay, so yeah, I think that'd be perfect landings. If I could pick the perfect landing spot for Bo Nix, of course he wants to go in the first round, would be the 49ers, in my opinion. There's about 6 quarterbacks. Okay, I would say it's kind of a 3-and-3 grouping. Maybe the top 3, the next rung of 3 are kind of the top 6 quarterbacks that have been talked about in this draft. Probably Caleb Williams, Drake May, Jane Daniels, the top 3. So that next 3 is kind of Bo, Michael Penix Jr., J.J. McCarthy. How would you rank Bo, Michael, and JJ, that next 3?
I mean, it's tough. As an Oregon fan who watched, or an Oregon guy who watched what Michael Penix in Washington did the past couple of
Yep.
years, it's hard not to put him up there. I mean, he's at the top of his game. He is incredible. He's got an incredible arm. He makes great reads. I thought it was funny that everyone made so much note of his 40 time and his, running ability in his pro day. It's like,
Mhm.
all right, that's great that he can do that. I've never seen him once do that in a game. I don't know that he will ever once do that in the NFL. But when it comes to Penix, you got to deal with the injuries. Obviously, that's
Mhm.
no secret. He's had a lot of injuries. It's all about his durability at the next level. If he can stay healthy, he's got a really great NFL career ahead of him. As far as JJ McCarthy, we've seen the success on the field. I don't know how much of that was due to actually him and his physical abilities and intangibles, or the product of the system around him. I'm curious to see what he does at the next level. I think he's a very talented quarterback. He's got a great arm, but I know that he also had a lot of help around him. And that's not to say that Bo Nix didn't have the same, but that trio that you named, they're really close together. I think that Penix probably has the highest ceiling of all of them, but maybe the lowest floor because of that
Mhm.
injury. I see Bo Nix and JJ McCarthy neck and neck. I mean, you can order them either way you want. I don't think you're getting a bad player if you go with either of them.
You make a great point about Michael Penix specifically because, yeah, he is athletic and he can run and he can move, but he never did because of
Mhm.
the 2 ACL tears and all the injuries. I mean, he had multiple seasons that were ended early in college, and you saw what he could do when he's healthy. So I'm with you, highest ceiling, lowest floor. And you could make a similar argument, like you said, for JJ, not for health reasons, but just his physical capabilities versus what he's actually shown us so far. So it's kind of interesting. Talk to me, Oregon, Washington rivalry. So I did go my senior year. I went around, not the team camps, not with my team, but individually after the Oregon State camp. So I was freaking exhausted. I went from the Oregon State camp to the Nebraska camp to the Washington State camp to the Idaho camp to the Oregon camp, and I was so exhausted. But my memory of the Oregon camp, outside of Bilotti telling me that I could play quarterback, which I don't believe to this day. But anyways, I digress. The memory that sticks out to me was I went back. I think it was for one of their fall practices, and it was back where you could do 2-a-days, and players were exhausted, and there were some fans as the players were walking to the field for one of their million 2-a-day practices, chanting, "Beat the Huskies, beat
Mhm.
the Huskies," and they weren't going to play Washington for months. Okay, how big is this rivalry? And it's going to continue into the Big Ten, which is awesome. How big is this rivalry for Oregon fans when it comes to Washington?
It's huge. I mean, it's the rivalry. A lot of Oregon State fans would claim that they're Oregon's biggest rival, and some Oregon fans say that the in-state rivalry it means a lot. But um, Washington's the team that Oregon wants to beat every year. I mean, they're your measuring stick. Unfortunately, they've come short of that, the past couple of years, and then they've lost, I think, 3 straight to Washington. But yeah, that's the biggest rivalry. You feel good for 364 days if you beat them. You feel bad for 364 days if you
Yeah.
don't till that next game. So Very excited going into the Big Ten that rivalry gets to continue. I think the rivalry is even going to grow just because you don't
Mhm.
have Oregon State. I mean, you'll still play Oregon State every year, but it won't be that conference game at the end of the year. This game against Washington's moving to rivalry week at the end of the year.
Mhm.
It'll be played in November, late November every year. So it'll be interesting to see how the competition level affects the rivalry at all. I think that Washington, obviously, after going to the national championship game, is on a little bit of a downward turn with all of the changes they've had this offseason with Kalen DeBoer leaving. But that's still, that's the absolute rivalry from Oregon. There's a lot of a lot of passion, I would say, on both sides of that.
The only other time I've ever seen anything like that was my first season in DC. We're playing the Buffalo Bills preseason game 1, and we're in the 4th quarter of that game, and the fans in the stands were in DC playing the game in DC. I never know what to call them. The Commanders, the team, I don't know.
Yeah,
So I
sure.
just say DC. The fans behind us start chanting, "We want Dallas. We want
Mm,
Dallas." That's the only other time. And again, we weren't going to play Dallas for like a month or 2.
yeah. And
That's the
it's
only time I've
preseason.
ever ever seen something like that. I turned to our D coordinator, Jim Haslett, and I
Mhm.
was like, "Wow, that's a big rivalry around." He goes, "Yeah, I agree."
Yeah.
All right, so real quick, actually, I should have allowed you to elaborate earlier. I apologize. Have you had any near death experiences at the Oregon sand dunes like I did actually twice?
No, I don't think so. I'm relatively risk averse, so when it comes to that, I kind of follow the rules a lot. So no near death experiences at the coast for me.
I'm happy to hear. I'm happy to hear that. Let's talk a little bit about the other rivalry that you mentioned that Oregon's going to keep playing, which is Oregon State. Are you surprised? Now, like you mentioned, non-conference earlier in the season every year. Are you surprised that they chose to keep playing Oregon State?
I don't think so because that rivalry is so ingrained in the history of the state. That still means a lot. While it may not have always been the most competitive rivalry, and it probably won't be going forward because of the way that
Hmm.
things are going at Oregon State, unfortunately. Um, no, I'm not surprised at all that they wanted to keep playing that game. It means so much. The game formerly known as the Civil War. I
Hmm.
kind of wish they'd go back to that name, but it's that's one of those things where Corvallis and Eugene, are so close together. I mean, it's 40 minutes away from where I'm sitting right now. You have actual split households all over the state where that was usually played on Thanksgiving week, and so you had families getting together for Thanksgiving, and half of the table was mad at the other half for how that
Hmm.
game went. So no, I'm not at all surprised they wanted to keep that tradition going. I hope they keep that for a long time.
So I was not aware that, and again, I haven't been in the Northwest in a while. My parents still live there. I was not aware they got rid of the nickname the Civil War. Man, the Apple Cup for Washington
Mhm.
State. You got the Heroes game, Nebraska, Iowa, good old fashioned hate, Georgia Tech. When and why did they get rid of that nickname, the Civil War?
I think it was in 2020, and it had a
Okay,
lot to do with, like, the Black Lives Matter movement, and I mean, I understand
gotcha.
the reasoning behind it, but they wanted
Okay,
to get away from terminology that had to do with, race relations and all of this stuff. So, it's one of those things where it's like, I don't know how hardly I wanna argue this and and get into
yeah,
it and say stuff that I wanna get in trouble with, but, it's one of those things that most fans have gone back to calling it the Civil War after a 1 or 2-year break. So we'll see if it actually officially sticks.
I got you. That makes sense. All right, so let's talk about Oregon's next quarterback, Dylan Gabriel. So it's when I wrote down this question, I wasn't sure how to phrase it. So I'm just going to
Mhm.
bluntly say it, and I mean it with all due respect. Do you think Dylan Gabriel, following in Bo Nix's footsteps, who had a great career as an overall whole in college, but particularly in Eugene, can Dylan Gabriel be even better? What are the expectations for Dylan Gabriel this season per Duck fans?
I think the expectations should be high. I don't think that people should come in here or think that he's going to come in here and be a ton better than Bo Nix because he doesn't need to be.
Hmm.
I mean, if Dylan Gabriel is a B plus, then he's an A because you look at all of the talent around him and all of the skill players and everything he has, the offensive line, the receivers, the running backs. I mean, if he's just average or slightly above average, that team is gonna do wonders this year. I mean, their offense is so good. I think they've got a really high ceiling going to the Big Ten, and Dylan Gabriel, he suffers a little bit from the old Bo Nix thing at Auburn, where he tries to do a lot sometimes. So I think part of what Will Stein and Dan Lanning are going to try and have him do this year is rein him in a little bit, let the playmakers around you do their thing. Just get the ball to them and don't make mistakes. We've seen him have absolutely incredible throws. He uses his feet really well, which Bo Nix did as well too. But they also had him stop doing that some his last year because they wanted to, save him from the injuries, because that's what really hurt them the first year, is getting injured late in the season, and that kind of derailed things. So I'm excited to see what Dylan Gabriel can do. He's a little bit smaller than Bo Nix, but he's more agile. He's got a really powerful arm, great deep ball. So but I think that he needs to just be, he doesn't need to be Marcus Mariota or Justin Herbert. He needs to be, a good, solid, reliable quarterback who plays within the system and lets everyone else thrive around him.
All right, so I'm going to give you, this is the tough question of the day. Are you ready for a tough question here?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I want it.
I like to have fun here. All right, so I'm going to give you 5 highly projected quarterbacks. I don't mean projection like NFL draft, but like predicted to do well in the Big Ten this year. I'm going to give you 5 names, okay, 5 quarterbacks in the Big Ten. Rank them 1 through 5 in your opinion. All right, Dylan Gabriel. All right, Washington quarterback Will Rogers, the Mississippi State transfer, who holds Mississippi State program records for nearly every major passing category and SEC records for single season and career completion. So anyways, Dylan Gabriel, Will Rogers, the Washington quarterback, Drew Aller, Penn State, okay, who I believe was Mr. Ohio coming out of high school for high school football, Will Howard at Ohio State, and Miller Moss at USC. How would you rank them? 1 being the best, 5 being the lowest. They're the top 5 quarterbacks projected in the Big Ten. 1 through 5, how would you rank them?
Take him off the board now. I mean, put Dylan Gabriel at the top. I really do think he's the most talented, one of the most experienced, and I think based on what the offense is around him, I think he's going to have the best year. I really do believe. I mean, he's one of the top Heisman contenders right now, and I think that's real. I think he could be up there. He'll probably be in New York when all is said and done. Behind that, I'm still really high on Drew Aller. I liked what I saw from his high school tape. I liked what I saw coming out. He's shown some flashes. I believe he looked really good in the bowl game last year as well. I think that if he can get going and Penn State can kind of figure out their offense a little bit, I think he can have a really high ceiling. I like what he projects to be. I know there's been a ton of buzz about Miller Moss. I know he looked really good in the bowl game. I want to see it in regular season games, so I'm probably going to put him 5th.
Okay.
Give me Will Rogers at 4, just because, he looks good. But I don't think that he's going to have a great year at Washington because they lost so much. I'm just, again, I need to see it with his new team. I know he's got the talent, he's got the skill. I just want to see it. And then Will Howard at 3. I think that I can't wait to see what that offense looks like with Chip Kelly. I mean, they've got the weapons, they've got all of the talent.
Yep.
He's got the same thing with Dylan Gabriel. If he can just kind of be an above average quarterback and let everyone work around him, they're going to be really, really good. So Ohio State's going to be something scary this year, I think.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that game, and maybe a preview of the Big Ten championship game when Ohio State comes to Eugene.
Yes.
I did one of my official visits to Eugene, and it was absolutely one of my favorite places. It was that place in Nebraska. And don't tell Husker fans, but at that point in time, I may have given the nod to Oregon at that point in time. After that game. But that was the Joey Harrington 02. I think it was 02. Maybe it was 01. It was 01 season. Wisconsin non-conference game at home. I think he dove over at the end and got the game-winning touchdown. That's the game I was there for. People were going freaking bonkers, and I was loving the Ducks after that game. All right, man. Let's see what we got next here. Let's talk about Oregon and you kind of alluded to it a little bit, but the expectations going in to the Big Ten. It's a whole new conference. It's a whole new style of play. All of a sudden, you've got cold weather games coming in November. Now, I would argue Oregon already looks like a Big Ten team. They're freaking huge on the offensive line. Dan Lanning wants to be physical. This is not the old Oregon teams that I, at the time, would argue they were too fast because they were too small. They'd hit teams with size and speed, and they'd get pushed around a little. This is not that. They are big. They're physical. They're athletic. So what are your expectations as Oregon heads into one of the top 2 conferences in the country, a new conference in the Big Ten Conference?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that they should be right up there. They should be contending for a Big Ten championship game to get a spot in that game. I really think they should be in that expanded college football playoff. This is one of the better Oregon teams on paper that we've seen in a long time. I know that there's a lot of fans that get hesitant about, there's fans get a little nervous when you start talking about, oh, this should be a championship year, because we've seen them get to that pinnacle before and then fall off
Mhm.
just short. So, but there's been starting some buzz to start in Eugene saying, this team might be able to do that, and people are kind of saying that under their breath right now and being a little cautious about it. But there is that feeling that this is the team that, you've got the right transfers in place, you've got the right recruits who have been here for a few years under Dan Lanning and started to develop into the team that he really wants to build. I loved what Dan Lanning said earlier in the year, that everyone keeps asking him, how are you going to adjust to the Big Ten? What are you going to do to play this style of ball? And he's like, what's the Big Ten going to do to adjust to us? I mean, because we're faster, we're stronger than a lot of these teams. They're going to have to, I mean, he didn't say this. I'm now speaking of myself again. Oregon's going to score 35 to 40 points a game. What Big Ten teams are going to stop them from doing that or keep up with them on the scoreboard? So I think expectations are rightfully very high right now. You look at the schedule, it really sets up pretty well for them. Their toughest game, Ohio State, like you said, is played at home. They've got a late game against Washington. I think that, again, is at home and should go well for them just because of who Washington is. Got to go to Michigan. That's a tough game, but Michigan's also maybe not the team they were last year. Got to go to Wisconsin late in the year too. I think that's a game that I have circled because I think Wisconsin's going to be a little bit better than a lot of people think. But other than that, a lot of, I think, pretty winnable games. So I think rightfully expectations are pretty high.
Wisconsin on the road in cold weather, and I agree with you. They're going to be better than people think. It's funny. That's a game that I have circled, even more so. No disrespect to the defending national champions, but Michigan or Washington, which is the biggest rival of the Ducks. I actually circled Ohio State, and then I circled Wisconsin, top
Yep.
two, and then I think Michigan and Washington were next. It's interesting to me because the two teams that were in the national championship last year, Washington, Michigan, of the 18 teams in the Big Ten, they're literally 18th and 17th out of 18 teams and returning players, returning
Yeah.
production. It's crazy. I think Michigan will be fine. They may even make the 12-team college football playoff. I'm really curious to see what happens with Washington, though. I've never seen a team make the national title game and then look so freaking different the next year. The only one that even reminds me remotely of this was it 2010 when Auburn and Cam Newton won the national championship?
Yeah.
They had 22 seniors, and then Cam went to the NFL. That team
Mhm.
looked completely different the next year. That's the only team that I can even think of. All right, man. I do.
Well, can I
Go
can
ahead.
I
Go
stop
ahead.
you real quick?
Yeah, go
Just
ahead.
we've been talking about the Oregon-Washington rivalry. That
Yeah.
week in January when you went from Washington has a chance to win the national championship against Michigan, and then 5 days later, their coach is gone and most of their
Mhm.
roster is gone after losing
Their
the
AD is gone
championship.
now.
Yeah.
Yep.
That roller coaster for Oregon fans. You just talk about the rivalry and the joy that fans take in your rival's downfall. I think
That's
that
funny.
that's like a Hall of Fame week in Oregon
Oh,
fans'
man.
lore, because there was a lot of celebrating at Washington's downfall.
That's funny. And so I'm obviously I played at Nebraska, so I'm a little bit of a homer there. So I tend to take jabs at Iowa. It would
Yeah.
help if we beat them more often. It would give me more validity. I take jabs at Texas just because they're Texas. Even Colorado, but it's more because I'm intrigued by what Deion's doing. He was my favorite
Yeah.
NFL player growing up. But it's hilarious that you say that because I can just imagine Oregon fans just getting happier as the week
Oh,
went
yeah.
along. That's awesome. All right, man. Let me see what we got here on my list of questions. All right. So because you brought up Dan Lanning and his recruiting to Oregon, he's recruited really well. And it's
Mhm.
not like Chip Kelly didn't recruit well or even Mike Bellotti. Okay, but I think Dan Lanning has recruited the best of any Oregon coach in a short tenure so far than any Ducks coach Oregon fans have ever had. How has he been able to recruit so well to Eugene?
That's a good question. I think he's just a very good recruiter. And we should not leave out Mario Cristobal too. He was an
Yes, yes.
incredible recruiter in Eugene. He had, I think he still has, if you look at the top 5 recruiting classes in the history of Oregon football, he's got 3 of them, and I think Dan Lanning has 2 of them for the
Mhm,
past 5 years or so. So Dan Lanning he's always said this. He's a very good relationship builder, and he keeps those relationships. That's why he's been able to do very well in the transfer portal as well, because
mhm.
there's guys that he recruited at Georgia that maybe he didn't get. I mean, Jordan Birch, for example, was a 5-star kid coming out, I believe, South Carolina. He recruited him at Georgia, did not get him. Birch goes in the transfer portal, and he says, "Hey, I'm still very close with you. Come on up to Oregon, play with us here." It's that type of stuff where he can keep these relationships for years on end. And he's just, at this point, we're in the cycle now where he's got enough proof in the pudding. He's shown what he's doing at Oregon. He's shown what he's building. That recruiting, I think, is pretty easy. Oregon calls a lot of these kids, and it's kind of hard to say no to them just based on everything they have. The uniforms, the facility, everything that they can offer these kids, and then the success on the field and the relationships with coaches and all of that, and the development that you get. So the recruiting has been very impressive to see over the past few years. I think it's only going to get better. They were the number 3 team in the nation last year in the recruiting cycle, which was, like I said, the best in Oregon history. I think that arrow is going to continue pointing up because it seems like they're really hitting their groove on the recruiting trail.
All right, so I don't want to backtrack. You said it, and I immediately thought of something that Scott Frost said. I'm like, oh, I'm not going to go there, but I got to bring it up because when Frost was first brought to Nebraska, he was asked about adjusting to the Big Ten, and he said the Big Ten's going to have to adjust to us. I'm paraphrasing, but that's basically what he said. So essentially very similar to what Dan Lanning said. So my question is, and it very, very similar, scoring points, going fast, putting, all that stuff, very, very similar to Dan Lanning. And I wish Scott Frost nothing but the best. At some point, he's going to coach again. I think he's a great OC. Maybe if he does well with that, which I think he will if he gets the chance, maybe he can build back up to a head coach. So no negativity. This is just what happened. Does that concern you at all? Is it that was not deja vu to you because you're not a Nebraska, but does that concern you at all when you hear what Dan Lanning said, which is very similar?
Doesn't concern me. I just want to see it play out. We heard a lot of talk from people. I'll just say people last year about going against Washington in the Big 12 or in the Pac-12 championship game after losing to them earlier, and it was kind of the same thing. It's like, they got us on a last-second field goal up there. Like, we're ready now. We're gonna kill these guys. And then it came out, and because a lot of things happened, there was injuries and everything. So, yes, sometimes this coaching staff they like to say a lot of things. I want to see them back it up a little bit more, but I have no question that they can eventually do that. It's just we need to actually see it. When you lose to your biggest rival 3 times straight, you need to put a little proof in the pudding.
Dude, I remember that Pac-12 championship game because I felt like Oregon outplayed Washington on Washington's home field. And Washington won the game. It's undeniable. They won the game. I felt probably weren't the better team. And it's always hard to beat the same team twice. And I thought Oregon was the better team. Couldn't say it because they lost. And I was like, it's hard to beat the same team twice. It's a neutral field. I picked Oregon. And I'll be honest with you. Washington not only won the game, I thought they were clearly the better team in that game. And they only won by a field goal again. I thought they were better than a field goal on that day. So I'm actually rooting for Oregon. I've always kind of liked Oregon. I actually grew up a Washington State fan. It was Nebraska, Washington State, and then actually Oregon State were my top 3. But Oregon was like 3A for me, my top 4 favorite schools. I've never liked Washington. So I'm rooting for Oregon, just an FYI. So I just want you to know that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And like you said, that Pac-12 championship game, I mean, I think that was kind of the overall feeling by most of the national media and the Oregon fan base certainly going into that game. And then Washington came out hot in that first quarter, and they kind of punched Oregon in the mouth, and it was like, whoa, okay, I didn't think we expected any of this. So yeah, that was an interesting first half to watch for sure.
All right, man. I appreciate you joining me, and let's exchange some contact info after this. I'll shoot you a text or an email or stuff. Let's do it again in the near future.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
All right, don't go anywhere, ladies and gentlemen. This has been the Big Ten Show, but we'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody, to the Big Ten Show. I am your host, Adam Carriker. All right, as always, you can check out the Jacobson Seed Company. They are our sponsors here on the Big Ten Show. Check them out at jacobsonseed.com. They are your healthy hybrid advantage. All right, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, was it January? Maybe early February? It's been a month or two ago since I gave my top 10 projected Big Ten players going into the NFL draft, since the NFL draft is right around the corner. All right, I'm going to give an updated list, go through some strengths, some weaknesses of each player. I'm going to go a little quicker than I did last time, because then I'm actually going to give my top 10 NFL draft projections, like the Bears, Washington, the Patriots, the Cardinals, the Chargers. Who are they actually going to draft? And there's a lot of quarterbacks that go early, but the top 6 quarterbacks, they don't all go in the top 10. I am going to, once I'm done projecting who my top 10 NFL draft picks will be in the NFL draft, I'm then going to elaborate on their quarterbacks who weren't taken in the top 10 out of those top 6 quarterbacks, where they go. I don't have them all going in the first round, by the way. All right, ladies and gentlemen. Number 1 overall projected pick, Caleb Williams, USC quarterback, 22 years old, 6'1", 250 pounds, won the 2022 Heisman, over 4,500 yards passing. He's got elite arm strength, elite arm talent. Okay, he can make throws from all sorts of angles. He has uncanny accuracy. He has uncanny accuracy from all over the place. Okay, while on the run, while in the pocket. All right, this is a guy who can move around. He can make plays. Now, that tends to bite him in the rear just a smidge, because sometimes he can rely on his playmaking ability too much and he becomes undisciplined. Okay, and he tries to play hero ball just a bit. Okay, sometimes there'd be a 10-yard completion right there. That's a first down. Take that. Instead, he might throw it deep, okay, to a guy who's covered, sometimes double coverage. So he's got to make better decisions. The physical talent is there. All right, the most physically talented guys in this year's NFL draft, in my opinion, Caleb Williams, Marvin Harrison Jr. Okay, I would throw in a guy like Brock Bowers. Like, those are probably the top 3 just purely talented players in this draft. There's a couple others in there if I were to finish out a top 5. But he's got to play more discipline now. Just letting the play come to him, okay, instead of sometimes always trying to make the plays, easier said than done. USC had no defense. It's like they were playing with 8 guys on defense. They weren't playing 8-man football, but I don't think anybody ever told their defensive coordinator they're supposed to have 11 guys out there. Or wait, that's Notre Dame, who tried to beat Ohio State with 10. Anyways, I digress. So in Caleb's defense, it was all on him. The offense had to score. He had to drive the offense. He had to lead the offense. I'm curious to see what he can do when he's got, I mean, he had weapons around him, but when he doesn't have to do every single thing, or at least he clearly felt that way. Okay, got a defense that's going to, maybe not give up a touchdown every time the opposing offense is on the field. Maybe he'll be more disciplined. Now, you want to talk about the fingernails and the dress and everything else. I don't really care about that politically. If you look at it from a GM's point of view, okay, the concern is how big of a distraction does he become? You can say what you want about Colin Kaepernick. Again, political stuff aside, he became a huge distraction. Tim Tebow, political stuff aside, religious stuff aside, okay, he became a huge distraction. Right now, Caleb Williams has as much talent as any quarterback that's entered the NFL draft since Andrew Luck, Robert Griffin III. But he's the biggest wild card, because is he going to rein himself in, play more disciplined, and how big of a distraction is he going to become or not become? Okay. All right. Number 2, Marvin Harrison Jr. This is a dude who's talented, who's fast. He's got speed. He's obviously worked with his dad his entire life as far as route running. Okay. Things of that nature. All right. Now, he's in my opinion, one of the, not just clearly the top wide receiver in this year's NFL draft. He's the top wide receiver to come out in quite a while in the NFL draft. Okay. And just trying to find, because every player has flaws, we're all human, just trying to find something. Here's what I could come up with. He's a little skinny for his frame. He does need to get off presses a little bit better. And he's great at getting open. He's great at catching the ball. He's great at making plays once he catches the ball, as long as there's not an immediate tackler there. He's got to have space. He needs to get better with pure yak. Okay, yards after catch, and being more physical after he catches the ball, because he often goes down on first contact. And that's, ladies and gentlemen, that's really nitpicking. Okay, the 3rd highest rated player going in the NFL draft I have out of the Big Ten is Washington wide receiver Romeo Dunze, 92 catches, 1,640 yards, 13 touchdowns. He's like silky smooth as a vertical threat down the field. The guy has body control in the air while trying to catch a deep ball in a one-on-one situation. Probably better than anybody in this NFL draft in that specific skill set. It's a dude who can make plays. Big-bodied receiver, great body control, who can get open, make plays downfield. Okay. Now, can he create vertical separation all the time? He makes a lot of contested catches because he doesn't always create separation from the DB. Will he still be able to make those contested catches against NFL DBs? Well, what could help himself is learning to get a little bit better separation, getting off the press better, creating some separation within the route, and then every catch doesn't have to feel like it's contested. Next up, Penn State offensive tackle, Olaf Fashone. This uber talented. Only 1 sack allowed in 21 career starts. Physical traits and footwork of an elite lineman. Hasn't even come close to his ceiling yet. Okay. JJ McCarthy, and this is interesting. All right. This is a guy, I'm just going to give you a little preview of my predicted top 10 picks in the NFL draft. He's a guy that could go as high as third or as low as 12th. Okay. I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. JJ McCarthy, I've talked about him a ton, so I'm going to keep this short. I'm keeping all these shorter because I did this a couple months ago. This is updated, shorter versions. The ceiling outside of Caleb Williams is as high as anybody in this draft. The floor outside of Michael Penix due to the injuries is as low as anybody in this draft. His physical skill set is off the charts. There's a reason he was a 5-star. What he's actually had to do and prove in college on an individual level, his team obviously was the best in the country, bar none. But on an individual level, just hasn't been there because he didn't have to. Great defense, run the ball, ball control. He's a little bit of a question mark as far as what he's actually going to do, but what he can do is unquestionable because of his frame, his arm talent, his ability to move with the ball. All right, next up, speaking of Oregon, all right, Troy Franklin, wide receiver, Oregon, one of the fastest draft risers. Okay, top 10 in receiving yards and touchdowns in FBS. He's a big play wide receiver. I am going to tell you, though, I actually don't have him going in the top 10 because if I were to pick in the top 10, he'd be one of my top receivers. I just don't know that NFL scouts see him the same way. Cooper DeJean, defensive back, returner, Iowa. I know the injury is a bit of a question mark, but the guy can play corner. He can play safety. He's a sure tackler. He got hurt and still earned Big Ten Defensive Back of the Year and Return Specialist of the Year. Oh, by the way, he's a return phenom. All right, number 8, Laiatu Latu, defensive end, UCLA. In my opinion, he's the top interior lineman prospect in this draft. Had a great Senior Bowl, going back to the Senior Bowl. I love when players show up and play great at the Senior Bowl, okay, because that's top talent, and those are one-on-one drills. This isn't about out scheming. This isn't about anything. It's about one-on-one with the best seniors that there are, and I love it when guys show out at the Senior Bowl. Okay, one of the youngest players at the Senior Bowl at the age of 21. Now, I played with a guy named Amobi Okoye at the Senior Bowl because he was from Louisville, who was 19. The first teenager to ever be drafted in the NFL. Just random fact right there I thought was interesting. Number 10 overall pick to the Houston Texans that year. A freaking teenager was a top 10 pick in the NFL draft. That's crazy. All right, you got number 9, quarterback Michael Penix. We talked about him earlier. I've talked about him in the past. In a nutshell, the guy can move. Got to be wary of the ACL injuries. The guy's insanely accurate. Are you concerned about his arm angles and throwing at all? And does the Michigan game concern you at all, or was Michigan just that freaking good? All right, Bo Nix, lowest floor of all these 6 quarterbacks, maybe the lowest ceiling, which isn't, an insult at all because these other 5 quarterbacks have insanely high ceilings. But he's got the lowest floor, most starting experience of any quarterback in NCAA football history. I think this is a guy that could potentially come in and start year 1, but I do agree with Zach from earlier in the show. Give him 1 year to get into a system, get him a system that fits him well. He could be a really, really good top 15 NFL quarterback. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we've got about 8 to 10 minutes left on the show. Here are my top 10 NFL draft projections. And then I'm going to tell you all 6 quarterbacks, the top 6 quarterbacks, I believe they will actually go because they don't all go in the top 10. Number 1, the Bears. I'm going to shock you with this. I have them taking, pause for effect, because you don't already know the answer, USC quarterback Caleb Williams. Now, there's rumors of a potential trade and them training down. And I mean, they traded Justin Fields away. So at some point, they do need a quarterback. So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they just don't want to play with a quarterback and they're going to trade down. And I will say this. If I was the Bears, and I don't know if I could have pulled this off, I would have tried to keep Justin Fields, trade down, and get who I believe are the 2 best pure football players in this draft, Marvin Harrison and Brock Bowers. Could you have imagined Justin Fields a quarterback? Okay. Marvin Harrison, a wide receiver. Brock Bowers at tight end. The top wide receiver prospect in 3 or 4 years to come out. The top tight end prospect in 5 or 6 years to come out of college. And then Justin Fields with his insane talent. Let's just develop him a smidge, Bears. I don't know, just a thought. What that could have been like now. Would that have been plausible or even reasonably feasible? Probably not. But it was just for fun. Here's what I think is going to happen. Bears take Caleb Williams, number 1 overall. Number 2, Washington. The football team, the Commanders, the whatever, I don't know. The team from D.C. It's interesting. There was some agent drama. Jaden Daniels' agent got all huffy puffy. They didn't just invite Jaden to interview him in D.C. They brought Drake May, and they brought everyone else. There was like 20 guys there, including a bunch of quarterbacks. How dare the Washington Commanders talk to more than just Jaden Daniels. You do realize they don't have the number 1 pick. They don't control their destiny. Okay. What if they trade back? They need to interview guys like Drake May and JJ McCarthy and even Caleb Williams because you never know what's going to happen. How dare they invite more than just Jaden Daniels to be interviewed by that team? Such an insult. What a ridiculous little baby fit that guy threw. I don't even know his name because I didn't take the time to look it up because I don't respect the fit. All right. I do have Washington taking. I guess the Bears only interviewed Caleb Williams. Maybe that gives validity to this little agent's fit. It doesn't because guess what? The Bears control their destiny. They got the number 1 pick. All right. I digress. The Washington Commanders, I project, take the next most talented quarterback in this draft. Not by much because Drake May's right there. He's just under the radar. LSU quarterback, former Heisman Trophy winner Jaden Daniels to Washington. Probably the most physically talented quarterback they've had in D.C. since Robert Griffin III. All right. The Patriots, no Bill Belichick. Arguably the greatest football coach of all time, eight-time Super Bowl champion. I'm curious to see what the Patriots look like going forward over the next 3 to 4 years. Got to give them a few years to build. No Bill Belichick. I think they take North Carolina quarterback Drake May. Now, I've seen some mock drafts where J.J. McCarthy gets popped here. I think that could be intriguing. He's as talented as Jaden. He's as talented as Drake May. Pardon me. I would still give Caleb Williams the overall talent edge of all these quarterbacks. It's just, I think there's more question marks with JJ. So I got Drake going here, but who knows? Maybe it's McCarthy. Number 4. And there's going to be some trades. I hate projecting trades because that just blows up everything and then you have no idea what's going on anywhere. Barring any trades. Arizona Cardinals, number 4. Take the guy, it's either him or Brock Bowers. One of the 2 best pure football players in this draft, Ohio State wide receiver Marvin Harrison. Number 5, the Chargers. Good old Jim Harbaugh. Back in the NFL. I can't wait to see what he does. The man was so close to winning the Super Bowl. Beating his brother John, if you remember, 49ers versus Ravens in that Super Bowl. John's won a Super Bowl. Jimmy John's dad has won championships in college and then helped Jim coach at Michigan. Obviously, Michigan 15-0 national champs last year. I actually like Jim Harbaugh. Am I in the minority? I actually like Jim Harbaugh, especially now Nebraska doesn't have to play him anymore. All right, Chargers, Jim Harbaugh. One of the 2 best pure football players in this draft, Georgia tight end Brock Bowers. All right, next, Giants. Wide receiver, Washington wide receiver Romeo Dunze. Now, to me, there's potentially 3 elite wide receivers in this draft. To me, there's a definite 2. Marvin Harrison, Romeo Dunze. All right, number 7 overall pick, Notre Dame offensive tackle Joe Alt going to the Titans. And I know Taylor Lewan's been out for a couple years and he retired a while ago, but they have not been able to purely replace him in Tennessee just yet. Left tackle Taylor Lewan. All right, next up, the Atlanta Falcons. LSU wide receiver. If you were to pick a 3rd elite wide receiver in this draft, it would be this guy. LSU wide receiver Malik Neighbors. Kirk Cousins down with the Falcons. I mean, he's got a talented wide receiver. He's got a talented tight end. Let's give him some more weapons, okay? Because that's just how the Falcons, they don't really ever play defense down there. I don't want to bring up the 28-3 Super Bowl loss, but had they just played a little bit of defense that day, they could have won, or I don't know, just run the clock, take a knee, just run out the Oh, I'm sorry I brought that up. All right. LSU wide receiver Malik Neighbors going to join my old boy, my old teammate up in D.C., Kirk Cousins. Probably if you were to have a 3rd wide receiver, elite wide receiver, it would be this man. The Bears, 2nd pick already. FSU edge rusher, Jared Verse. Now, this is a guy who's the top edge rusher in my opinion. Why didn't you help your boys and play in the Orange Bowl against Georgia? What was it, 63,000 to negative 63,000? Anyways, I digress. Congrats on being a top 10 pick, hopefully. And I'm rooting for you to have a great NFL career. Jets. And this is my surprise. It's the Alabama bump. Because most people don't have them going until 15 to 20. Dallas Turner. Another edge rusher, because you got to be able to get after the quarterback, ladies and gentlemen. Now, it wouldn't shock me if the Jets did pop a young quarterback, but they do have Zach Wilson. They do have Aaron Rodgers, so probably not. All right, the quarterbacks who didn't get drafted. I should have just done top 12, and here's why. Because I have Minnesota taking J.J. McCarthy at 11, and I have Michael Penix Jr. going to Denver at 12. So there's my top 12 picks in the NFL draft. Now, Bo Nix, this is a guy that could go to the Steelers maybe at 20. I know they've got Fields. I know they've got Russell Wilson. But this is a guy that if let Fields and Wilson battle it out this year, okay, because neither one of them are with their former teams for a reason, although I do think Fields, given some actual weapons in Chicago, could have been pretty good. I don't think Steelers is the premier landing spot for Bo Nix at all, just an option. I do really like the 49ers at 31. I really do. I think that'd be a great spot for him to go. Chatted with a couple of folks. I get the impression they're not going to pull the trigger. I hope I'm wrong, because I think he'd be a perfect fit there. And I think they're just – and Purdy actually played decent in the Super Bowl. All right. They had a couple of turnovers. They had a bunch of penalties in those first couple of drives. That wasn't Purdy's fault. He actually looked good. But I do think a quarterback competition could help the 49ers. But I do think he's going to go in the second round of the draft. That is or day 2 of the draft. I think second round, probably pretty early. So those are my thoughts. Top 10 NFL, actually top 12 picks in the NFL draft, barring trades, which could blow everything up, where I think the top 6 quarterbacks will go. And I know I didn't give a specific team for Bo Nix. Okay. But I did the top 5 quarterbacks and told you what round Bo's going to go. That's good enough. All right, ladies and gentlemen, you ever wondered why, if you can see me on YouTube, if you're listening on sound-only podcast platforms, I almost always wear a collared shirt or a V-neck shirt. You ever wondered why? Because I pretty much never wear any other time. You know, it's this concept of trying to look somewhat kind of sort of un poquito professional. And basically, my wife told me to. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's been another edition of the Big Ten Show. Thanks for joining me. I'll see you fine folks right here again next week. As always, you can check out some of my other shows. I got the Carriker Chronicles. Check them out at carrikerchronicles.com. Also, go to YouTube. You got nothing better to do with your life. Type in Carriker Chronicles. You'll see my big, ugly mug without a collared shirt and my flapping gums. Hopefully, it might be entertaining. It's up to you whether you think it's good or not. Until next time, it's been the Big Ten Show. I'm Adam Carriker. Have a great day.